I'm Ariana Grande.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Erivo.
And you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Visit vpn.fm to discover more.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. You might know him from being on the Disney movie Newsies, but he is one of the most jellical people we have had on the show, performing it regionally on the U.S. National Tour 5, and then directing it regionally as well. So welcome, Chaz Wolcott, and thank you for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited to have you because the director part of this is I'm fascinated by, especially regionally. So we're going to get there. I want to spend a lot of time on you building out the Jellicle world for your productions. But let's start at the beginning. Let's start at your cast history. When did you first see it? Since you went on tour in 2010, I think you first did it in 2007. Was it the 1998 movie? Like, what was the introduction?
No, I was about 7 years old in Ohio, and the tour came through, and I was a dancer. I'd been in dance for about 4 or 5 years at that point. But I wasn't super serious about it. But my parents were both dancers. They got me into dance class, and we saw Cats. And I left and said, "Mom, I want to play Mr. Mistoffelees one day. I need to take another ballet class." And so I always hated ballet. I loved tap and jazz, but I hated ballet. And I enrolled in another ballet class the next year. It took me, quite a few years after that before I finally got to do it. But then that was it. It was the dream. I stated it when I was a little kid. I was mesmerized by the Cats on stage. I had a VHS of that 98 cast and wore it out multiple times. We had to buy multiple ones and got a DVD back in the day. So Cast has been an obsession. Probably, I would say, the show that put me into musical theater in general. And there's so many Cats haters out there. I love saying that over and over again because I think generationally, a lot of folks in my age group saw that show when they were a kid. It's Lion King maybe is another one for folks that the magic of the show just drew me in. And I found out people could do that as a job. And I was hooked. I was like, that's the thing. And so that 7-year-old that saw Cats, the national tour, that's created my whole life now. 30 years later, I'm still doing musical theater. I kind of take it all back to Cats. My freshman year of college, I auditioned for Music Theater of Wichita was doing a production of it in Kansas. And I got it, and I got to play Mr. Mistoffelees, and that was after my freshman year of college. And then my spring break of my senior year, I was in New York City doing some workshops and seeing shows, and they had auditions for the national tour, and I was like, this is my moment. I'm going to go audition for it. And I did, and I actually got offered a job on the spot.
Wow.
At the audition to be a kitten swing. But I was still in school. I had 6 weeks left, and it was one of those very intense programs that I probably wouldn't have gotten my degree if I didn't finish those 6 weeks. And so I politely told them, "Oh my gosh, this is my dream, but I have to say no. I have 6 weeks left." And then it just so happened that the person that was playing Mistoffelees endured an injury the day before I graduated. They called me and they said, "Hey, what was the date that you're available?" And I said, "Tomorrow about noon." And they said, "Could you fly out tomorrow night?" And I did. And so I joined the national tour I graduated, walked across the stage and walked onto a flight and joined the national tour as Mistoffelees for what ended up being in and out of it for about 3 years. So yeah, a wild journey to get
wow.
where.
Okay. So let's I got some follow-up questions. So I want to start. So you've been manifesting this since 7 years old. Yeah. And what was your did you have this reaction of as a freshman, you're now able to do this professionally? It's like internship season and you're going to do your summer stock or whatever the regional version of that is. Yeah. And you get a chance to do Cats, and not just Cats, but you get a chance to not just be a swing, but do the role that you dreamed of right away. I mean, this is freshman year. This is the first thing you're doing professionally, right? I would assume at that point.
Yeah, it was my first professional job. Yeah.
Wow. And you ready to go.
I got to do the show with Dana Salamondo, who was a swing on Broadway, and Billy Johnstone, who I think they're both swings, but they played also certain, they went in and out of swinging and playing company members. And so I learned the original choreography and got all of the original direction and ideas of the show. It was so incredible. I remember I got to fly in on like a big starburst as Mr. Mistoffelees, which is still the only time I ever got to fly in. But it was, I was 19. I had no idea how cool all this stuff was, but I was so excited. It was still my dream show, and I did know it was very cool, but looking back now, I'm like, holy moly. I'm also an educator, and so thinking of my first year students and how very few of them would get to do something that awesome. That's just such a lucky break.
Yeah.
It was just right place, right time. I was the right thing they were looking for in that moment. It was so awesome. And to get to do it with that team, I got to spend the whole summer there and have this wonderful experience. And we'll talk about this later, but I actually full circle got to go back and direct and choreograph Cats there last year. And that was such an awesome, it was my first time there as a director choreographer, just like my first show there was as a performer was Cats. So, it was a really awesome full circle moment for me. This show kind of keeps doing more full circles over and over.
Yes.
And it's, always meant the world to me. It's my favorite entity. And I think it still continues to inspire new generations and new performers all over. It is such a unique show, and no other show is quite like it. And I think the magic behind it is so important, even in those regional settings, maybe even more in those regional settings, because you're opening up access to a show that many people in those communities maybe have never seen before. And so, you talked about the direction of it and how to bring that in. I think it's imperative in every production for all of that magic that I witnessed when I was a 7-year-old to come into the show. And so I hold it really as it's very truthful to me about what the show should be and what has to be in there and what people have to feel when they see it. And I think there's like I said, so many haters out there, but I'm one of those people who is through and through a lover of Cats and just the musical. I actually am allergic to the animal, but I love the musical through and through.
Okay. I agree. I think the hate on it it's an easy punchline. It's always an easy punchline. And I think it's weird and confusing if you don't unpack it. And so for someone who sees it one time, if you don't, if you missed a little or you kind of weren't fully in or had other stuff going on in life, you probably didn't fully grasp what you're seeing. But every time someone does it, it is crazy to me to see the hook that it brings into so many people when they get to perform it. I want to go back. So you got the opportunity on the spot to do it, but you had to say no because of school. Is there this is such a foreign thing to me, but is it we need somebody right now, and if you can't do it, we're not going to hold the spot for you or even offer it later. So they just kind of put you in a file, and then it just was very fortuitous that it was the day that you graduated that they were like, yeah, we actually still need you. Is that how that works essentially?
Yeah, that was, you nailed it. It was, they had lost somebody as a kitten swing. They were having the auditions for the next leg, the next year.
Okay.
And it just so happens that right before those auditions, they had lost a kitten swing, and not they didn't misplace him, but left the show. And so they didn't even tell us they were auditioning that at that moment. We thought we were auditioning for the fall, and which is why I was there, because I was available in the fall, And so they're like, hey, we'd like for you to join the cast now. Are you available? And I was like, no, I'm not. It was pretty crazy. So that was a different track. They filled that track. And then a few months later, they also had another, an injury situation. And then that was the one I was able to fill in. So, the show is so hard and so difficult on your body. And the touring is so difficult on your mind. So, there was some turnover sometimes, which, like I said, right place, right time. I was available to jump in. It was pretty wild. Again, right place, right time. So lucky to get that right out of college. Again, as an educator, I say the same thing where I'm like, most of my college graduates don't just hop onto a national tour right afterwards, even if they're incredibly talented. So I got very, very, very lucky and very, very thankful. That was an awesome experience to learn the show on the road and get put into it. I learned most of the tour version of things in a dressing room in Minneapolis, a carpeted dressing room. With our dance captain, Brad Landers, and then eventually got to do the full rehearsal process with Richard Stafford, the director of the tour. So I've been able to experience different takes on the show as well, different directions, different leaders that, bring, even if it's the same choreography, Jillian's original choreography, it still has its own differences.
Yeah.
And I've also done the show regionally with Jacob Brent. So I've had like 3 completely different creative teams that have kind of taught me the show, which is really awesome. And I've gotten lots of different perspectives on it.
Let's dig into that, because that's where I want to start this, because I want to hear some tour stories and everything else, and we're going to get into a lot of the directing piece of it. I think this question is actually part of what I'm going to ask you later about the directing. But when we think about the world building and the storytelling, not the choreography, not the dance, like those are all nuanced, not a podcast format anyways. And also I couldn't tell you the first thing about any of those dance moves, but I can tell you about, this is the backstory. This is what we go here. These 2 are related. These 2 are not. They're supposed to be mad at this person. We're supposed to accept this person. As you had multiple different versions, you have I'm going to do it for 3 weeks in Wichita freshman year. I'm going on tour and going to jump in for an injury very fast. And then I'm going to probably join, I think it was the 2011, you started to join like the full group, full time as Mistoffelees. Tell me through the differences of what you are essentially given for Mistoffelees. Like, how deep do they go when you're doing it that freshman year versus when you're going to go bus and truck for a full year?
Yeah. I mean, I have been lucky that I think all the teams that I had ever worked with were all very interested in telling the story that is kind of not written in the lyrics necessarily, but the stuff you're talking about, the sort of legend of Cats. I also will say that I think some of what I know about Cats is sort of this unofficial passed down lore of the show where, was it the director that specifically said this, or was it implied, or did the person who played Old Deuteronomy, who'd played it before, bring that in? And, the swing that came in to do, you learn, you just hear things sometimes and people just kind of throw out a phrase about, a character that you're like, oh, I didn't know that about Grisabella, and you put these things together. And so I think I have a picture of what Cats is supposed to be based on the variety of experiences that I've had with the show and seeing the show and hearing from different creative teams. I don't think mine is probably anywhere near what the original team necessarily wanted or said, but I think it's like these stories are sort of like passed down through generations of performers, and they've created these narratives, these relationships. I've even listening to your podcast, I've realized, I listened to this amazing interview with Terrence Mann, and I was horrified to find out that half the stuff I know about, he's like, oh, I've never heard of that, and I was like, what? So I just assumed that was like, the original team in there selling us all these things. But really, I think some of it has been created by the performers themselves as they're trying to make sense of what's happening on stage and create relationships. I think some of those friendships and allies and romantic connections and whatever were created by the performers. And I actually think that's kind of beautiful, because where the story isn't super specific, I think the performers have kind of added so much of that specificity into it. They've added these relationships and these rivalries. And, I obviously feel as Mistoffelees, there's some kind of weird rivalry with Tugger, because I say he's a terrible bore as Mistoffelees, but then Tugger sings a whole song about Mistoffelees, so that's interesting to unpack. And I think with different Rum Tum Tuggers that I've done the show with, we've had different takes on that. Some of us were actually kind of rivals, and some of us were really good friends, and that probably indicated how we treated each other on stage. What I love about Cats is there is a lot of flexibility in what's written in this, there is not really even a script in the score. There's not, all that stuff isn't specified out, so I don't think any of the teams ever kind of skipped over any of that stuff because of time. I think we always tried to get all of that in. I just don't think all of it's formal. I think some of it comes in when they say, oh, well, of course Demeter runs over to Grisabella first because they used to be best friends. And you're like, oh, Demeter and Grisabella used to be best friends. You just like hear these things, and I don't know if they're making that up in the moment or if that's Gillian Lynn said. I don't know who came, I don't know where the origins of these things are. But I will say, as a 19-year-old, I thought all of it was 100%, like true and serious, and was initially dramaturgically created by the team on, in the West End. So to even hear some of these interviews and go, oh my gosh, they didn't talk about any of that stuff. It's fascinating.
True.
But some of those things that I hold really close, I'm sure they're like, oh, we never talked about that in Broadway, or we never talked about it in London. So it's interesting. But I think I got to hear a lot about Mistoffelees from Billy Johnstone in Wichita, who had covered the role. I got to hear a lot about Mistoffelees from Richard Stafford, who was a dance captain of the show. And of course, I got to hear a ton about Mistoffelees from Jacob Brent, who's like the iconic one. And I've got to spend so much time talking to them about sort of the quirks and charismatic qualities of Mistoffelees. I would like to think that mine's some amalgamation of all their ideas of who the character should be. And now, like, when I get to direct the show, I'm sure it's every production is similar but has its own DNA, which again, I think it's maybe the beauty of it. As a performer, that flexibility gives you so much stuff to play with on stage. You have these very specific steps and shapes you have to create with your body, and you have to be in a specific light spot, whatever. But so much of the relationship can be played with the other characters on stage. And I think that's the improv of that was my favorite part of it. It's my favorite show I've ever done because there was so much specificity, yet so much improvisational opportunity in the show too. And so, the differences are plentiful, like tons of different things are mentioned. And I didn't feel like I was doing the same production at all in any of them. Because I think people like cherry pick what they remember about their experience and what they pass down. And, of course we like learn the same steps, but the meaning behind certain things and the quotes that they would quote from Gillian Lynn and just like little things that I think of, but, maybe another person who did Cats for years and years and years have never heard "Titties to the Wind, Darling," but I assume that's a pretty famous one, So anyway, there's lots of little things that happen in Cats rehearsals that I think are specific to that creative team and that cast, and maybe are passed down. Some of the ideas are passed down, but a lot of it is shifted and molded and changed and adapted. And I think maybe that's why the show is so confusing for people.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the beautiful things about it.
I think it's what also creates some of the fandom, because there's so much like I think the fans probably created just as much as the character and the performers. I do think there's two things I think that this show, I'm convinced that might get me in trouble, but I'll say it and I'm fine with it.
I love it.
One of them is I'm just convinced that the era that this was created was such a drug-induced era.
Yes.
That I'm sure most of this was either not talked about or was talked about in maybe a way that they just were like, yeah, sure, and then forgot about it the next day. And so I think that there's probably a piece of that. The other part that I think is so unique to cats is that they're cats. It's not humans. It's not people. Whereas it would be very different if you were like, well, this could be an orgy on stage. Like that's a very different play or musical today if you do that with humans. But that's what the ball is, right? Like there's some of these assumptions that you can make, like the whole Victoria coming of age story is a different story if you do it with a human on stage. Right. And so I think they got away with a lot of this, like, well, they could be sisters, they could be lovers, they could be this, because they're all cats and who knows? Like they're all strays, essentially. And I think that got them a lot of the, like, they didn't have to think all that through because it wasn't really material to what they were trying to do. And it is what created, I think, the fandom, or at least part of the fandom. There's obviously way more to the fandom. There's the dance and, it's such an incredible show. The
costumes.
Yeah, costumes.
So many things.
So many parts to it. But if you go to like the Wikipedia page, the theories, the reason I agreed to this show from day one, as someone who did not know it almost at all, like I kind of made a joke and had a punchline, and I found so much content that I was like, wait a second, if you take this as truth and this is truth, or these can't be possible if these two things are true, it's just endless. And that's what actually fascinated me most about this show, was being able to say, well, hold on, if you do it this way, it's not going to change the dance number. It's not going to change the end of the story. It's not going to change this. But it does make that number really interesting if you watch it from that lens. Or the looks that happen, all these things. When I saw it after doing 100 episodes of the show, I finally got to see it again on stage. I saw the 6 tour, and I could not get over well, wow, these two did this, and this is over here. And I would have never thought about that in viewing one. And it's why I think there's so many people, I interviewed someone who they saw the show 80 times or something in the revival. I mean, you can do that because you get a very different experience each time.
But I think that also is it would be so specific to whatever cast you saw.
Yeah.
And like, I know that, I dated someone in the show. So obviously that person and I are probably going to have a different relationship than two people that played those characters in another show. Those.
Yeah.
But you can't help but those, especially in the background when people are just crawling around and, those two cats are always together. Well, yeah, they happen to be best friends.
Yeah.
I think some of that stuff is probably, that's what I think is kind of special about it. And that's what I love the fan fiction stuff. It's because you could like create these things just based on one performance and you're like, oh my gosh, wait, what? Are we always together? I didn't even notice that, whatever. I do remember one thing that I think is controversial is I know I've been told multiple times from different creative team members is that Mistoffelees and Victoria are like in some way connected, like boyfriend, girlfriend. I was told once prince and princess of the tribe. I mean, but to me, that doesn't really make any sense with any of the plot that we do know is in there. Mistoffelees doesn't really ever, besides the invitation, doesn't really do much with Victoria. She obviously has her moments in the ball that have nothing to do with Mistoffelees. And so there's some interesting theories there too. I mean, I was always fascinated why they would say we were kind of a little couple. Yeah. And then to me, we break up after the invitation. I'm not sure, but we never really cross paths again.
No, so. It's all the Tugopheles, Tuxtopheles. That's all the rumors and half of the graphic art.
Tugger and Stoffelees, yeah. And that is an interesting one. I definitely think something is going on between those two, for sure. I've never been given a ton of backstory between the two of those characters, which is wild because he sings a whole song about Mistoffelees.
I wish I could find it quickly. I can't do it, but I did look up at the fan fiction. If you go to fan fiction,
I've read some of that.
It is mostly about that. It's a high percentage of all of the fan fiction about cats is about the two of them. And it gets interesting. It was one of the first things I did when I did the show was I did in my Mistoffelees episode when I was just actually debating why each cat was more worthy before I started interviewing people. Mm-hmm. And I read some on an episode, and it is it's interesting. It's a deep dive, but it is kind of that story arc makes sense to me because you're singing about each other. You kind of have some moments on stage together. That like it's written into the show in some capacity. So that one's there. But all the other ones, like you said, Victoria Mistoffelees, or there's so many others. Like I think a lot about Victoria and Grisabella, or the Grisabella's relation to a bunch of them. They're not clearly written in there. You don't get Grisabella on stage that far to really be able to dig in. Okay.
And no dialogue.
Yeah.
No dialogue with her really besides Demeter. I mean, no one else really gets to really relate with her.
We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died. This is our pivot point to what I want to talk about, which is your directing. So you've done it 4 times that I have here. 2017 and 2022 at the Interwix Theater. You did it full circle with Wichita in 2023. And then most recently, Suncoast Broadway Dinner Theater, which was when we're recording this about a month ago. So I want to talk about how much direction do you give in that piece? So let's talk about if you're sitting down, do you do a story time and give them their 3 words? And what is that? What is the detail to this?
Actually, all of those things. You could just be, you could step in for me. You have all the ideas. I do take the 3 word that have kind of been passed down through history. I give that out on day 1. And I actually have a thing that I call cat story time. And I sit down with the cats and I tell them my version of the events and tell them sort of what I know. But the first thing I usually do, or after, we'll do a little bit of story time, and then I'll ask them to sort of line themselves up in like age order of what they think. Most of the time, they don't have a ton of history with the show, which is really exciting. And so sometimes they'll kind of put like old Deuteronomy will probably put themselves at the ageist, the highest age or whatever. But it's really interesting to kind of look at that and see where they think they are. And then me go, maybe you should go over here. You should go over here. And you should, and then I kind of establish that. And then I go, okay, let's do the same thing with like power or kind of stature in the tribe. Like where would you think you rank sort of in the tribe in terms of like who would we want out there, defending us? And that's another interesting experiment. Also has to do with age a bit as well. But And so we kind of do that. And then I am a big felinity person. I think felinity in the show is the make or break. Felinity obviously is like just acting like a cat, but having people think about where a cat reacts from, unfortunately we can't have those CGI tails on stage, but tails, if you can get your tail to fly up somehow, we react from your stomach, your ears can perk up. Like, how does a cat respond to things? And so something that most of those directors that I got to work with did, and then I passed down to any cast I've worked on the show with, is, having them crawl around the space and find how to be a cat and how to lick like a cat and how to react. I'll make huge noises or throw something at them or whatever, and have not them, but near them. And have them react as a cat would, and it's so silly, and it feels so like theater school silly, but it really is a huge difference maker in the getting the humans to just kind of embody it, because at first everyone's like, oh my gosh, we're doing cats, and they get their rehearsal tail on and they're like, what am I doing? What did I sign up for? This is so silly. But really getting some time on that, and I spend some time on it. I mean, I will spend quite some time doing some felinity exercises and talking about the story. To me, when I've seen productions of cats that didn't quite land for me, it's always because when I look around the stage, there's just humans sitting on the stage watching each other. Yeah. Even just like the way they sit sometimes or the way they move around, they just don't even seem to be trying to embody a different type of animal. And at the core of the show, one of the most interesting parts visually is watching a bunch of humans act like cats, right? Like that. Like at the end of the day, if we're not doing that, no one's going to get any of the story. If they're just like, why is that human sitting in a unitard with a tail? So I think if we can embody that, I think that's the most amazing thing. I have this great picture from the production I did in New Hampshire during the house cat section of the top of Act 2, where the cats are crawling around the house, which is one of my favorite parts of the show. There were all these adults with their iPhones out, like taking pictures of these two cats crawling around up on a banister. And there's this little girl right in between them, and her face in the picture I took, I didn't even mean to take a picture of this girl, but I saw it. I was really taking a picture of how many adults were taking pictures on their phone. I was like, good Lord, put your phone away, as I had my phone out taking a picture of them. But I took this picture and I saw this little girl, and the little girl's eyes are just like so wide, because she in that moment was like she knows they're not cats, but she just had that like moment of disbelief because they were acting like cats, And I was like, she got the magic. Everybody else put your stupid phone away, but like she, but it was like, so to me, if that's not present, if those little kids don't have a moment of going, wait a minute. Oh, no, they can't be cats. They're not cats. No, cats aren't that big, but if they see the sets oversized, and if they just have a moment of suspending their disbelief, then we've won, And so I think that, to me, that stuff is so important. So that's kind of how I start the process. Yeah. We do a little story time, we do a little hierarchy and age looks, and then felinity stuff.
What's the percentage, like of the rehearsal process, the whole thing, that I would assume this is my guess, highest percentage is the choreography and the singing and like staging and making sure, especially with how much movement is like they're in the right spot. They're not going to like kick somebody. But what's the percent of that versus the felinity versus the story time? Like if you had to break that out.
I mean, I definitely think because there's so much choreography that ends up taking over a ton of the process. But I think that I would look at, once everything's set, right, and we're like ready and we're kind of like running the show, what do I give notes on is always exclusively felinity and story. Okay. Like I will occasionally be like, hey, you're on the wrong count on this thing, but like it is hardly ever that. It's like, what does it mean? Where is Grisabella? Where are we looking? What are we talking about? Why are you sitting on your booty? Cats don't sit on their butt. Like whatever. Like it is, I am very nitpicky about them looking like cats on stage and like really physically showing us what the story and the relationships are. Mm-hmm. And so like, sometimes I'll be getting in the nitty gritty about dance notes, but at the end of the day, like that's what I mean. So yes, I think a bulk of the rehearsal process has to be spent on choreography because there's so much music and there's never a scene, but for a show that has no scenes, the amount of notes that I give on relationships and on physical, like embodiment of relationships is very high. Some dance related shows would never have anything like that. But
I love that.
I think that's kind of the glue that holds the show together. It can't just be a bunch of dance numbers, you know what I mean?
For
it can't
sure.
just be like a dance recital.
You need the story. It has to tell it, or especially with the way, I still want to change the ending, but the way you get to the ending, if you don't tell that story well, then it's almost confusing because you have to see that animosity early on, or it doesn't land later when there's the redemption.
Yeah, and she can't have any redemption if we're not completely denying her through the whole show. There can't be the moment where she finally gets vulnerable enough to say, touch me. I know it's so easy to leave me alone and just forget about me, but I need you. And then we go, oh, wow, she really needs us. She's really begging for us to help her. And this is what this is the vulnerability she's never willing to show. Before that, she just kind of walked away when we put up our walls and she didn't really fight for us to pay attention to her. If that stuff isn't all visible on the stage, and it's not in the script necessarily, some of it, but it's not all in there. And so we have to visually show it, or else we don't earn any of it. We don't earn any of the any care that we could have for the story or any empathy we'd have for the characters.
Totally.
Unless we care about them, unless we see all that story, which has to be told through the physicalization. Luckily, cats, when we're embodying cats, cats are not shy about showing you how they feel about things, more so than humans. Humans have very nuanced reactions to things. Cats are, they will hiss at you or scratch you or like stick up their back like a little haunted house cat. They've definitely they stick their booty and their tail in your face. Cats have a way of showing you how they feel. And so, there are definitely options to show that physical embodiment of the story. But it's so important. And if you spend all of your time worrying about the dances and cleaning the dances, like the dances will look great, but they won't mean anything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think especially with a story like this, you need it. It's so critical.
And I think that's why this show is very commonly a director/choreographer kind of situation now, because I think that they tie together. Like you can't just have a choreographer create movement that has no like direction to it or meaning. And so I think I've seen, especially regionally, there's like a lot of times where it's a director/choreographer. It's one person doing, or one team kind of working on the same thing. Whereas in most musicals, a director and a choreographer would sort of be separate people doing somewhat separate things. Trying to accomplish the same thing. But I think one of the reasons this show kind of gets parsed down to one person a lot of the time is because they want to make sure everything's aligning together. I think the original team, of course, worked together and unified and stuff, but this show, the director wouldn't have anything to do in most of the rehearsal process as everyone's on stage doing, the rum tum tugger dance break.
I did notice that as I've looked at resumes and stuff, and I kind of had that assumption. And the other thought of me was, as someone who works in the business world, was like, well, maybe it's just cost cutting. Yeah.
Yes.
Which maybe it's a little bit of both.
That too.
But it does make sense in a show like this that there is that combination. I want to go back to story time. So when you do story time, do you have it written out, or do you just like, is it top of your head? Do you have like an outline?
I don't. I definitely talk. I don't have it written out. Maybe I should. That'd be an interesting essay. But I talk through. It's very conversational, right? It's not necessarily that I'm trying to prove something to them. I try to share the things that I've heard about the story. And I think a big part of it for me is kind of starting from Grisabella and starting from Old Deuteronomy and kind of building out relationships and the webs there, and trying to help people center what their thought is in this relationship and what, when Grisabella enters the stage, how does their character feel? They don't have to necessarily understand how everyone feels, especially the kittens. Like they don't necessarily even know who Grisabella is.
Yeah.
Maybe they've heard about her or whatever. And so what is your relationship to Grisabella? What is your relationship to Old Deuteronomy? And then ideally, we would parse out sort of what is your relationship to all of these cats that come out, and as we're staging each number kind of individually, like when I get to Bustopher Jones, I have certain cats that I'm like, okay, you're obsessed with Bustopher Jones. And then there's people who I'm like, you probably don't really care about Bustopher Jones because in your 3 words is, whatever, you're apathetic or over it, so you kind of over on the side grooming, you don't necessarily care what Bustopher Jones has to say. And then obviously Jenny Anydots is obsessed with Bustopher Jones given the context of her singing the song. So, I think developing relationships is, I think, the most important part of that story time. and trying to get people to start to relate. And that's why I do it right away. I usually do it before we even stage anything. Because before we even get going, I want people to know like who they're looking at. You know, when you're dealing with a play, you're like, oh, this is my brother that I'm speaking to in this scene, or this is my neighbor, or what, you know. But in this show, it's like you just see these names and you get 3 words about them, and you know, there's so much to be filled in. So I want to at least fill in the things that I think are pretty agreed upon in the Cats universe. You know, the big picture things. I hope, at least in my Cats universe, they're agreed upon. And then, you know, I'll say, and, you know, in my opinion, maybe blah, 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 you know, and add in little things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's I think it's the best way to kind of get things rolling. So, and I also think it sets in a expectation with the cast that I'm always going to care about that. Mm-hmm. And it's not something I'm adding in later because, you know, it looks like we don't have a story. Like, I want to be like, no, we're starting from a place of like, there is a story and a plot and a community of cats that are related to each other. I actually had somebody bring up this debate recently with me where they said, you know, aren't they all strays coming from all over different places? No. Like, don't they not know each other? And I go, oh, no, they all know each other. Like, well, don't they live different places? And I was like, well, you know, yes. I was like, but I think it's mostly the London area. And I was like, and I think they all know each other. And I think they come every year and, you know, but it was like this big difference as someone's done the show. And they were like, oh, I just kind of thought they all just arrived. And I was like, oh, well, that would be a terrible place to start a musical from because no one would know each other, you know? So I was like, even if that's what they wanted, I was like, I hate that because then we don't have any pre-relationships with each other, you know? So, but yeah, I think the relationships are the key, you know, people will say there's no plot or there's no story. And I completely disagree with that. But if there's no relationships evident on the stage, then I can see why people would say that, you know?
Well, I think that as someone there's no like sitcom plot is what I would say. There's no like very neat and tidy rom-com. I know what's going to happen. Conflict or resolution. It's much more of a world building. You get to experience what they're experiencing with this kind of loose through line, ending with a little bit of a plot. So I get that. But it sounds like in your story time, you're going through the story as they do it as the show. So it's like, we're going to start here, and then we're going to go to Jenny Any Dots, and then we're going to go here. And in that, you kind of add, okay, you're all the kitten, so you're listening to Jenny, and you're here. You don't care about bus for. That is essentially it. I would love to have you like write it out, or I would love to be a fly on the wall. It's one of my dreams to come to one of these rehearsals and be
my gosh,
let me just add some stuff. Let me add some lore here that you're.
Oh yeah.
That,
well, and that's what I like. I think. What is nice, like I said, generationally, right? Like a lot of people that I work on the show with have never done the show, and maybe they've seen it, but they're not as, you know, they certainly aren't as versed in it maybe as you are or that I am. And so it's nice to like give them a little push off. And then I swear, like day 2 or 3, they come in like, okay, I read this fan theory that and I'm like, there it is. Like, you know, because I think but it also just gives them permission to do some exploration and figure some stuff out and make some decisions for themselves and not just play a cat the whole time.
It is crazy. Exactly. Not just fan theory, but as the last couple, probably year and a half, I've gotten messages. I start learning about productions because I'll get messages, or I'll just hear like there are a bunch of people listening to these episodes because it's a version of that. Like, it's Forget Me. You get to hear someone who did it in 2016, or you get to hear from Terrence Mann, or, you know, some version of this that maybe you hadn't experienced. And then if you really want to go, you go deep into the fan theories. Like, there are some super fans who have, the part I love about them, but is where I differ, is they have very strong opinions one way or the other. Whereas I love the fact that I don't know if it's right or wrong. I like the idea that like, this is what I think, but I want an answer. Like, I would love to have an answer, but I don't think we're going to get one.
I don't think there is one. I think you're very right when you talked about the era that the Cats created in. I think some of it is like, I don't really think there were really specific answers. And so I think, you know, I think people have their strong convictions, and I do too, I guess, about certain things. You know, there are certain things that I'd be like, that is wrong, you know, but I think it's funny to also just think like we get that worked up about something that probably there isn't really a correct answer, you know, or
totally.
something that was really never thought about or cared about, maybe possibly. And so it's interesting. But I mean, to me, when I was an actor, I think what was really fun about that is it gave me a lot of freedom.
Yep.
And that was fun to play with, which has probably only developed more fan theory of the show is all the freedom that actors have in it.
Yeah, but, which I think is cool. I love that part of it because you get to have some fun with a friend, or if you're dating somebody who's not a character that your cat should be dating, you know, like if you think about it from the personality wise, you get a different relationship. And I think that's the coolest part about this show. And why I think also people love doing it is that it's not hit my mark, do my line.
Yes.
There's 8,000. I mean, there's so many versions of this.
And there's that part of it in terms of choreography, right? There's so much expected of you from a choreographic standpoint and vocal standpoint. I mean, this is one of the harder scores in musical theater too. And so, you know, there are like lofty expectations of what you need to bring to the show, but then there is this little element of freedom that you don't get in most musicals. That I think is really fun. And what I always say is like, it was the easiest show to do for a long time, even though it's physically draining.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the same every day and we could like play a little bit within the confines, obviously.
For sure.
But it, you know, and I think that freedom is really, a lot of actors get bored and stagnant doing the same show over and over again. But Cats, it's very hard to get bored doing that. Always something to play with, you know?
So let's ask you the question that you can plead the fifth, but as someone who has your story time, you get to like dictate this for people going to see the show. Do you have any hot takes? Do you have any like controversial theories that you are like, you know what? I don't know if this was ever told to me, but like I'm in on this theory.
I was expecting you to ask me the big question.
That's coming at the end.
And I was like, I was ready with that one. So that might be my hot take. It's not that hot. I'm going to warn you. Don't get too excited. But okay, are there any theories that I buy into? Okay. An interesting one that, I mean, this is kind of like activation warning for listeners. I'm going to talk about some like assault things that might be not your favorite things. So just skip ahead a few minutes. But there's this conversation storyline about maybe Demeter's relationship with Macavity that maybe involves like a traumatic past. We'll leave it at that. That I 100% understand and think makes perfect sense in the storyline. But it's interesting, like as sort of a more trauma-informed human that tries to make theater that is a little bit more considerate of the humans in the room than maybe it was in the past. I try not to bring that conversation into the show rehearsal because I don't want that. I just don't know that we need to go there. But I do think that I usually mention kind of on this layer that I'll mention that some people think that this maybe is where Demeter is coming from at the beginning of the show, even that she gets scared in the headlights because something maybe just happened with Macavity. And the reason that she's always freaking out when she thinks of Macavity coming in is because there's some kind of traumatic past with him. I don't think it's, and to me, that makes sense. I think that ties in with what we see from Demeter in this show. I don't necessarily know that was ever dictated. But I think
it was though, because that's the part that I found. I've used that example, and it is a huge trigger warning because it is but I've used that as the example, which is when you talk about how weird the show is a little bit, about how there isn't a story, but yet there is a story. I've always kind of go back to like the one consistent thing that nobody has argued is that story. Mm-hmm. And that to me is also a little weird that like, we're not sure if Tugger and Mistoffelees are together. We're not sure if this is happening. We're not sure if that's happening, but her fear of Macavity is very clear. It's one of the few, like there's no debate on that. Mm-hmm. And I've also found that part a little strange. I think it's more of just like the skittish nature of you have to play, like that whole song dictates on the two of them having almost opposite personalities from that same moment, that it does feel like one of the few things that they did write out a little bit more, which is weird that that's the one they chose to write out more. Like you could have built out a lot of other storylines in more depth. Like what's going on with Skimbleshanks' backstory besides he's on time, you know, like I could have had more there. You could have
what's he doing when he's busy?
And that's the one that we get like depth on that nobody debates. And I find that fascinating, and it's in a weird way.
Well, it might be because, I mean, that's what I said. Like, I 100% buy into that. I think it would make sense with what is written. And like, it does seem like they wrote that intentionally. I'm trying to think of like theories now. Can
I give you one that I want to have happen? That's not real, that I just think is fun.
Yeah.
I think because I know Bustopher Jones is one that's cut out from Royal Caribbean and a bunch of other production. Like, he's kind of a afterthought. And I know that there's the relationship with Joey Lorem, right? There's some connection there, right? Am I wrong there?
With Bustopher?
Yeah.
And Joey Lorem? I mean, yeah. I would maybe go for Jenny and
more Jenny
first,
than Jelly.
But
okay,
yeah, but maybe Jelly.
I was always thinking
both.
Jenny and Jelly's kind of hatred of Grisabella, I thought could have been a broken love triangle with Bustopher.
Oh wow! See, this is my gosh. I'm gonna have to unpack that one in my brain.
There's no written on that. This is me.
No.
This is pure me.
I love it.
That I want to add some stuff to the story.
There you go. I think, Bustopher, I will say, that's one of those cats that I sort of don't think deeply about. I kind of think we kind of like get what Bustopher is.
Yeah.
I haven't given Bustopher Jones a ton of thought in my life.
He's fully out of Royal Caribbean Cruises. They cut him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
doesn't shock me.
It makes sense. He's an interesting cat.
I will say, I know that there are folks who kind of connect Jelly and Gus, and I have always felt that relationship is that of like a nurse caregiver type situation. Like, that's how I direct it. But I have seen it directed other ways. And I, like almost like wife that's like, oh, that's husband of mine. Yeah. And I've never, I feel like the gentle caretaker of a hospice patient is how I kind of feel that relationship goes.
I have not thought about them romantically.
No,
so
but
that's
I know
interesting.
people
Have done that.
Yeah. Well, I think people play it that way sometimes. Maybe that's just maybe it's just my interpretation of their performances. But I don't know I don't know if I buy into many. But I do find it fascinating what people find in that show, because to me, like, especially from a directing standpoint, there's so many messages that I'm trying to send, and then people will catch like this thing, and I will know exactly why that thing exists, and I'll be like, oh no, like, so in this recent production, I'm kind of adding my own choreography into the show, right, as I work on the show and doing my own version of things, which is fun and interesting to play with, but then it creates these other narratives that I will go, oh my gosh, no, that, so I make Skimbleshanks a tap number usually, and I've always felt the music calls for the frenetic tapping. It's interesting, the 2019 movie did that. And I was like, yes, I've always wanted it to be a tap number. And so anyways, but I've done it a few times, and this last time I had these two fantastic tap dancers in the cast who I kind of gave a feature to in the Skimbleshanks, like in one of the verses of Skimbleshanks. And somebody was like, are they a couple or something? And I was like, no, they're just two great tap dancers. And so it's like fan fiction can be created from a logistical thing that happens sometimes, so we call it the Pounce to Teaser tap break. Pounceville and Rumple Teaser in that particular production, but I don't think Pounceville and Rumple Teaser are connected really in any sense at all. See, this is how sometimes fan fiction gets created, right?
Okay.
Somebody that saw that production might think that Pounceville and Rumple Teaser are an item, so I don't think that. I bet you haven't heard that one before.
No, that is not one I've ever thought about or considered, but I think that's
because you didn't see it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I didn't get to come down to Florida. I didn't get the invite. I would have come.
That's what I mean is you wonder if like maybe Tugger sings Mistoffelees because Terrence Mann was a great singer, and they're like, oh, that's who could sing.
We want him to.
That's it.
That was like the really whole. That was all that went into it. And then
back in the day, some of it was like about what color contract you had as an actor, and if you had a certain color contract, you had to sing a certain amount of songs. And so like it could be something as logistical and silly as that has now developed into 40 years of people being like, those two
together.
There's something about and it. Not to ruin the magic, of course they're connected, of course, but it always makes me wonder how many of those logistical things have now turned into narrative things with a show that has so much flexibility in it. You know?
And there's some that I've been able to uncover some on the show where it's like, these two are friends, or there was like a weird writing in the fan fiction that I could go ask them. And there's others that I'm like, we're going to make the council teaser a thing now, you know, like we're going to bring that one into the lore and add it to the fan fiction.
I love it.
But it's what makes it fun, because I don't think anybody that went and saw your production in Florida got a different, like they didn't see a different Cats. They still saw Cats at its core. And that's fun that you can have those little tweaks. And same with like the set, they can have it in a slightly different location. And
yes, that is a big thing that I'm really loving playing with is changing the set. The first time I directed it, we did it in a junkyard, and that's, always so wonderful. Second time, it was an abandoned theater, like a backstage of a theater. The third time was an abandoned amusement park. And then the fourth time was an abandoned factory. And so like, it's really fun to play with, like, for me, one of the big things that comes out is like, what do the Beatles tap dance with? Like, what are their props in their hand? Is something I play with. When they come in for Jenny Any Dots, it'll be different based on where they are, where they find themselves. And so, this last time they had wrenches and screwdrivers because we were in a factory. And the time when we were in the theater, they had lipsticks and mascara things that they were holding as, little cats or whatever. It's really fun. At the amusement park, it was straws, like bendy straws that they like take out, And so like I think the scenic element can really, for me, I also like to make each production kind of feel fresh and new and change some stuff and think of things. I think I keep the storyline generally, but I like kind of change, choreography.
I have an idea for you?
I like it's really fun for me because it also makes me think new, like in a new way. I'm like, oh, okay, I can't even go back to the old things that I know because we're in a new place and this looks totally different. Yeah. What's your idea?
Oh, well,
is it a new scenic idea?
No, I have the one thing I want to do so badly, and this is my pitch, because if you get another chance to do this, I will fly on my own dime and help you. I want to do not an Edwin Drew style, because I don't think that you but some version of where every night
the audience votes.
Either the audience votes or there's a different Jellicle choice. So you can do the whole thing up to Grisabella singing. You can still re-accept her. Like, I don't want to ruin the redemption story. Bring her back. But instead of sending her up the tire, she's now part of the family. She's back in the family. She's going to be there together. And then you vote. And I know someone did this with the chorus line, and they had a different person cast each time. And it is ready to do. If someone can get approval, I don't know. There's probably way more to this than just...
Actually, I don't know, because you're not talking about changing anything within the songs or the lyrics. I mean, really, it would just be during the up, up, up section, probably. You would stage some kind of Jellicle choice.
Someone goes...
I thought you were going to say the audience votes.
Well, the audience... I want audience voting, but I feel like that's harder. Yeah, so audience voting would be like more... I kind of want it to be cheering, or some version of like... Because I thought about this on tour. You hear all these great stories of like, we're back in my hometown. There's 200 people in this theater that are my friends.
Yes.
I'm I want you on the tire then.
Yeah. That'd be so fun.
I do want, like, if you put some competition into this, because of how you're doing 8 shows a week, or it's different regionally, so it'd be a little harder. But I want this, like, no, this person brought it tonight. Like, this was their A game. Like, we all saw that they gave it their all. I want that, like, Mungo Jerry Rumple teaser were so good tonight. I want them going.
I love that. Well, see, okay, so you're thinking of it like winning American Idol, right? You're thinking like you're American Next Idol. I've always thought of it as a chance for someone to get a new life. And so the reason, I don't want to hint at what my answer is going to be here, but the reason that I feel like Grisabella ultimately gets it is because she needs it more, even more than Gus. Because I think Gus has Jelly and has this consistency in his life. He might be, dwindling and older, but his life is okay. He gets to tell his stories. Jelly helps him recreate his old memories, and he's okay. He's retired, and he's he still has his wits about him. He's losing some of them, but he's okay. Like, he's okay. He'll last until next year. Whereas Grisabella, because of whatever, has impacted her life, whatever you perceive that to be, she really can't get forward. She falls because she can't really continue. And so she really needs a new chance at life. And so, I mean, if you think of it from that standpoint, then like, why would Rumpelteazer get to go up to the heavy side layer? You know what I mean? But I mean, if you give her the acceptance and somehow indicate that she's going to be rejuvenated by, maybe that's what it needs to be played, that she just needs their acceptance and not like a new
she needs her family.
Life.
She wants to go to birthday parties next year and have some fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So
she wants to dance the ball with them too.
Yeah, there's no doubt that I saw Leona Lewis as my first Grisabella, and that might have influenced how I viewed this show. I won't shy away from seeing an X Factor winner, watching that, going like, this is an X Factor with cats on drugs, and that is the lens I saw this for the first time, and it is why I've kind of gone down that path. I don't disagree with you in the sense of like the redemption arc in there. I think the debate that I philosophically have right now with her choice is, will she make it to next year? And if you don't believe she will, then I think you have to pick her. My argument is, I think by being reaccepted with her family, she should have an incredible life and an incredible year that she's been yearning for. And we're about to just rip it from her and kill her and bring her to the next year.
Yeah, I think one of the narratives that's probably in my head is that I think of her as someone who maybe, fell into the wrong crowd, fell into the wrong people. And as if I had to think of a human like this, it'd be somebody who like needed to go to rehab, someone like that had fallen into those kind of issues. And I think that's where my head goes like, oh, she might not, like even with the nursing back of her family, she might not be able to make it through this like addiction problem or whatever is going on. And so I think, but again, if you think of it more of just an acceptance route, like she just needs to be accepted by her family, then, then they let her back in and she should be, good to go for next year. You're complicating my thought. I mean, I've been working with the show for 20 years and now you're like making me question it here.
I'm slowly trying to influence somebody to do a different version.
It's working.
And
I love that.
That's my goal. My goal now is...
I love the Jellicle choice being... different every night. I think that's so fun.
If we can get the technology, we fan vote it on our phones, but I don't like people bringing their phone out because I think that does ruin some of theater. I would love to just do an applause or have somebody each night make a call, like have somebody from the cast, because I think it is just the fun of having a different person go up and having it feel like that, like changing that narrative, I think is what I'm shooting for. So if you do this again and you're willing to make that decision, I will be the first person to meet you at any part of this. I'll be at rehearsals. I'll come wherever you are in the country and I'll be there.
I love that idea. I think it's so interesting to play with like how how you could do it. I mean, and I will tell you, I loved the revival of Drood that did the audience voting. I thought it was such an awesome concept that kept people engaged. And I don't know if it was real or not, but I loved it. I think that's the thing is then people would be like, but they don't really have to do anything after that. Like at least in Drood, they had to like sing a song when they,
No, they go up. You show them how to go up the stairs and then they come back down, or if you need to, or Grisabella, you stage her. Maybe she goes up someday. She's going to win some nights. She's probably going to win a lot of nights because
she probably would win a lot. With
memory being the end. But I just keep thinking of the day where I'm like, your 200 family members are there. Like there's going to be some, Tumble Brutus is going up today just because Tumble Brutus' whole family is there.
I think of that day for me when I was in the show and, oh boy, okay, I'm not going to cry on a podcast. But I lost my father while I was on the tour and I was able to, luckily they let me spend some time with him, before he died. But the day he died, I went back to the show and I didn't want to be alone in my hotel room. And I asked them if I could come back into the show that night, which was by far the hardest production I've ever done in my life. But that particular part of the show was really tough for me. It was really a lot of, a lot was coming up for me and I was just sobbing on stage. I could not control myself. And I guarantee you if that cast voting was happening, my cast would have picked me that night. And I think it would have been very cathartic for me. Probably would have cried my eyes out going up that cloud. But yeah, I mean, I think that could be a very beautiful thing as well and kind of spread it out to people and give people, I also think there's something message-wise that's really sweet about that kind of, it's not just I've always loved that when she finally becomes vulnerable and allows herself to really beg us for forgiveness and to come back, I think that's when we finally like give in to her and say like, hey, like, you finally were able to beg and ask for what you needed and let down your ego. And I think there's something beautiful about like accepting her after that happens. But I also think there's something beautiful about accepting like someone who's worked really hard. I like think of like Jenny Any Dots or something who, is like out there training those beetles, and, like Jelly Lorem who's taking care of Gus so selflessly, and, or whoever that, might be able to win that just they deserve it too,
It's an ensemble show at its core. And so to give them that victory in some capacity, although it's a weird thing to call victory when it's like, we're going to sacrifice you.
Yes.
But I think it's there. And I think like with a show that's been around for so long, that one tweak will make this a really interesting production to be a part of.
I really don't think there's anything in the script that demands the current ending. In fact, it's oddly not written in there. It's just kind of what everyone always does, but I don't think it's what you assume, but it's not. There's no script. There's just a score. There's no thing that says like Isabella. I don't think. I'll have to check on that.
You've done it once the past 3 years. So I'm just throwing this out there. If you tackle this show in 2025,
maybe that's the year for it.
I'm
40.
I'm
40
free.
some years.
I'm available.
Okay, good
I'm ready.
Good to know.
I will drop what I'm doing to be
and
there.
And you'll still say that the wrong cat died each night because you will have personally felt that someone else should have gone up.
Well, maybe it's my vote. Maybe the day I might have a day where I can record.
Voter.
No, I don't want to be the sole voter. but there might be a day where I agree with the crowd. And then I'll think, the right cat did die.
There better be an episode that said tonight the right cat died.
Honestly, if I can convince somebody to do this and I can go document the whole story of it, it might be the end of the show. It'll be, I don't know what else.
We don't want that.
There's too many people still to talk to. But that would be definitely a highlight of this podcast. And I would go with camera crew and all to be a part of it. Whatever anybody's willing to let me do.
What's beautiful about this concept, I'm really into it, is that the show has been around for so long and so many people think that they've seen it, and they like, it still sells so well in every venue I've ever done the show in. But I feel like there is sort of this like, it's always like, oh yeah, it's better than what I said in New York, or like it's always like a direct comparison of like the two very similar things. I mean, even when I'm like, I've changed so much, they're like, this is just like when I saw it on Took. I'm like, no, it's not. It's totally different. Skimbleshanks was a Taft number, But anyway, so it would be interesting to actually like approach it like it's a little different this time. Yeah. It's not this, come to see who wins, whatever. Could be an interesting take on it. I was thinking more like ask the audience from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where they like put in their answer, and
we could, the
tabulated.
Technology
I'm
is there.
Sure it'd be funny. Yeah.
It's more of just like, do you want them to pull the phone out? Because then there's still a number after.
Yeah.
Unless you change that too. But if not, you have a number after. It's like they go up, and then there's a whole song.
Addressing. Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, well, I don't want them to be phone in hand. Like now, maybe there's a way to wire up the theater a little bit and just have something like on the seat.
There it is.
Like there's a lot of choices. That just because it's a math problem of production costs. But there's also just a good old fashioned everyone cheer, and you go down the line, and you can do it that way.
Yeah.
Or you could just rig it and have old Deuteronomy actually choose by himself every night. There's a lot of ways, but I want it to be
you could pick one person in the audience to choose,
Ooh, it's a lot of power. It's your jellicle choice tonight.
Yeah.
That's,
it could be an interesting,
there we go. That's even different.
Could be like a lottery system of what seat you pull out.
Yeah.
Could work.
That would terrify some people, I'm sure.
Yes.
But get a big like ping pong ball like lottery.
Yeah.
And it's a seat number, and then you spotlight
one person gets to make a decision.
And they choose. That would be, you'd have to give them a list though, because otherwise it's going to be unfair. It's going to be,
they don't know some people.
They're not going to know some of the names.
Cats' names. Yeah, that's a good point.
But we can solve this. It's a solvable problem.
It is a solvable problem. I'm intrigued by it. I think what's beautiful about like the show's been around for so long. There's literally 2 movies of the show, and so everybody, if they want to see the original production, they can see the original production. They can also see this movie version in London, and they could do, but to see like a new rendition of it, I know you talked a bit before we started recording about the ballroom Cats that's coming to New York.
Yeah.
I think that just finding new worlds in which cats can live is always such a fun challenge, to kind of challenge people's understanding of what the show is, or
Totally.
finding new, like, oh wait, that's not what I remember. And I think it can be fun. I think we're in that era now of Cats where it doesn't always have to be a replication of the original, and I think it's actually really interesting when it's not. I know for me, it's been really rewarding, really scary and daunting. Believe me, it really scared me to do that. But it's been really rewarding to try to put kind of my own thoughts into it and my own style into it. And I think I know the original so well that I know like what has to be there and what moments really matter and what story needs to happen, but have been able to take some liberties and evolve things. And I think that's what theater should do, right? We don't have to always just replicate and, recreate the exact same thing that happened before.
Totally. All right. Well, we've answered the final question. So your vote's Grisabella. I want to make sure we still get the rapid fire real fast because we've gone very long today, which is great because this has been amazing. If you could go on, I'm going to take Mistoffelees off the table. One night, any cat. Who do you want to perform as?
Demeter.
Love it. Favorite
or Rumple Teaser. Demeter or
Okay.
Rumple Teaser. Yeah. Those have always been my dream roles.
And least favorite cat. So if you like personality wise.
Favorite Demeter, least favorite Play-Doh.
Play-Doh, okay.
So boring. So boring.
Favorite song in the show?
McCavity.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
And
such a jam.
It's probably one of my favorites. I actually wish there was the one on the cast album is like 8 minutes. And I'm like, can I get like a 3-minute version? Like just the part that we all really want to hear. So I can put it into my playlist and not be on the subway with a weird, quiet, like interlude to it.
Yes.
So one day
fight
someone's
and
going to
everything
make
else
that.
in it. Yeah.
Which cat, my fun one, who would be the best director choreographer? Which cat would be best at doing
Kimball
that?
Shanks.
Okay.
Definitely
That's where my head went to.
Yeah. Very
All right.
organized. Yeah.
This has been so fun. How can people stay in touch with you on social media and everything you're working on?
I think all of my social media handles are Dancin' Chaz, DANCINCHAZ. And I have a website that I update on my projects, chazwolcott.com. Yeah. I hope to do Cats many more times. Like I said, it's been a consistent show in my life since I was a child, and it was a dream, and then a dream realized, and then I've gotten to work on it in so many different capacities, and so I hope to keep doing it. So, and maybe one of these days try the vote method at the end.
I was going to say, you manifested your Mistoffelees. I'm hoping I've manifested a different ending.
Yeah.
And I will be there. I'm ready. Whenever you're ready, you know how to get in touch with me.
Yeah.
I will be the first person to show up to your rehearsals. I can't perform or do anything to help you besides lore, storytelling, and figuring out how to make this ending work.
I love it. We got to just develop a little button or something people can press, and then we're golden. And make it cheap that theaters
cheap
will
enough. Yeah, cheap enough that it fits in budget. I can figure that part out. The text. I'm not worried about the tech side actually at all.
Okay.
I just need someone to take that risk.
Yeah. I think risks are always worth it. Sometimes they don't work out, but it's always better to take a risk than to stay complacent and do the same thing over and over again.
Well, we're ready. We're here, and it'll be amazing. It'll be super fun.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. I loved hearing how you think about the story, your experience doing it, directing it, and everything in between. What an incredible conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thanks for bringing so much fun to the world of Cats and talking with so many inspiring people who've helped me figure out that this show is my dream show. And it's been so entertaining just to listen to other people talk about it and realize how passionate people feel about Cats from all walks of life and people that have done the show for its whole history. It's awesome.
It's been fun to document the 40 plus years. So it's been awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again. And thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the Cast catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any else on the podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Wrong Cat Died. Check out our website, thewrongcatdied.com.